Hello and welcome to our latest Nesta Talks to, our conversational event series with today's most exciting thinkers on the big topics related to our missions and innovation methods. My name is Jonathan Bone and I lead much of Nesta's work related to school food as part of our Healthy Life mission. For those of you who are new to Nesta, we are the UK's innovation agency for social good. We design, test and scale solutions to society's biggest problems. Our three missions are to help people live healthy lives, create a sustainable future, and give every child a fair start. The Healthy Life mission, within which I work, has the goal of helping people live longer, healthier lives by halving the number of people with obesity in the UK over the 10 years to 2030. And we're approaching this goal with a focus on improving food environments and making healthy eating easier, regardless of how little money or time people have, where they live, or how health conscious they are. School food is one of the areas we're interested in as part of this mission in particular. And that's because in the UK, more than 2/3 of children are obese or overweight by the time they finish primary school at age 10 or 11. And schools are likely to be an important part of the puzzle when it comes to decreasing this statistic. Not only is a place where a large proportion of children's meals and snacks are actually eaten, but also as a place where there are opportunities for nutrition education, and whether for good or bad, eating habits are often picked up from peers. And here to talk to us about the role of schools, the role that schools can play in improving children's diets, and importantly, how this can be achieved at scale, is Dan Parker. Now, Dan is the co-founder and creative director of Veg Power, a campaign which utilizes advertising and marketing to inspire children to eat more vegetables. Veg Power's work includes the multi-award-winning Eat Them to Defeat Them campaign, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. And Dan has extensive background of over 25 years in the marketing and advertising industry. He served as chief executive and executive creative director at the renowned agency Sponge, where he was at the forefront of innovative marketing techniques for major global brands. When it comes to encouraging healthy behaviors, I think we have a lot to learn from the advertising and marketing industry. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to Dan today. So first of all, welcome to Nesta Talks to Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Hello, everybody.
Great to see you. And before I start with my questions to Dan, I wanted to just invite the audience to join the conversation in the comments box on the right-hand side of your screen and ask any questions throughout the event. Also, just to let the audience know, closed captions can be accessed via the LinkedIn live stream. So first of all, Dan, the move from running a successful marketing agency with clients, including some of the food and drinks brands, which most people likely agree are less than healthy, to co-founding a not-for-profit organization which aims to encourage healthy eating is a really interesting one. Can you tell us a bit about your motivations for setting up Veg Power?
I spent, say, 25 years working around agencies mostly, and owning and running my own agencies for about 15 years. And a very large part of our client base was food. And if you think of the biggest soft drink brands and biggest quick service restaurant brands, and these kind of brands were my big career clients. And I got to about the age of 45, 46, and sort of, stepped outside of my bubble a little bit and went, you know what, I think I'm probably not making the world a better place. And, I had pushed out an awful lot of burgers and an awful lot of soft drinks. Let's stay with soft drinks. And so what I decided to do, and I became very aware, my dad died and he had always struggled heavily with obesity. I was struggling with weight myself. And I just started looking at the world around me and going, you know what, I think I might be part of the problem here. So I closed down my advertising agency. I started volunteering for Jamie Oliver on Sugar Smart. Started mixing it in the public health and NGO community and seeing how I could bring those years of experience I have of behavior change on food, which is, what the advertising industry does, and see whether I could offer something of value to the public health community. And frankly, I was quite shocked and surprised by the gulf, shall we say, between the commercial food industry and the public health space when it comes to insight and communications.
Thanks, Dan. And yeah, it's a really good point around kind of public health. And I think public health messaging does typically involve telling people why something is bad for them, and so they should do less of it, or why something else is good for them and they should do more of it. And I was really interested by the kind of the eat them to defeat them slogan, which really feels like it kind of turns that on the head. Could you tell us a bit more about your inspiration for this? And if you have any other examples of lessons those working in public health could take from the marketing industry?
Okay, so I mean, let me go back a little bit on that. So I kind of came into public health space around the same time as the 2016 Childhood Obesity Plan, which apparently is going to save us all by 2026. So any moment now. And I was kind of gobsmacked the difference I saw, and particularly the difference in quality of insight is quite profound in terms of the information, the data, and the methods that the food industry employ. Really a very, very long way ahead of what you find in academia and NGOs, which is partly down to access to data, but I think it's also sort of perhaps more the way they're thinking. And I think that thinking might look at things that what you see an awful lot in the world of public health is a sort of basic belief that systems drive markets and markets drive behavior. And therefore, if you move systems levers, you change behavior. And you end up with a comms model that's a kind of fear and knowledge comms model that you touched that says, if you don't do this, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and death, here's an eat well plate, here's a recipe, now go sort yourself out. That's a basic gist of most public health communications through time. And we know from the food industry, that's just not how decisions are made. Decisions are not made through knowledge, they're made through emotional connections. So the food industry would look at the other way around and say, actually, demand drives the market and market drives the system. And of course, it's circular, but the point where you can influence change is in the demand, which is the desire. And so they understand that food decisions are not made on the knowledge plane, they're made on the emotional plane. So if you think of any piece of work in marketing or advertising around food starts with a psych profile, right? And I don't think I've ever seen a psych profile in public health. But the starting point of every campaign is a psych profile that really digs pretty deep into people's greatest hopes and dreams and fears and ambitions, and then looks to push those emotional buttons using media in order to bring about behavior change. So if you think about the Bisto lady, Linda Bellingham, you think about a Mars a day helps you work, rest, and play, you think Red Bull gives you wings, these ideas are all pushing emotional buttons. They're talking to our desires, and that ultimately brings about behavior change. You then, to your actual question, right? Your actual question was about eat them to defeat them. And what we apply, which I think generally is, again, a difference between advertising and public health, is advertising says, why should you do something? So simple question to everybody in the audience, you can answer in your head very quickly. Why should you eat less meat? We all know the answer. There's about 3 or 4 answers. Why should you eat more vegetables? Why should you do more exercise? Why should you stop smoking? Right? We can all give the same answers. But if you say, being that meat sales are completely flat and dairy sales are completely flat and nothing has changed in the last 5 years, right? Why don't people stop eating meat? Why don't people eat more vegetables? And if you ask those questions, you start to connect with the emotional levers rather than the knowledge levers, which is where the secret to behavior change starts. So what we did when we started Veg Power, and we working very closely with ITV and a fabulous advertising agency called Adam and Eve, and we asked a question, says, why don't kids eat more veg? And we went to academics, we went to supermarkets, we went to schools and teachers and cooks and chefs and parents and behavioral scientists and loads of different people, and just asked them just that one question. And then we condensed it down to a model, which is simple. And that model looks a bit like this, is that for many children, they think vegetables are disgusting. But it's more complex than that. They think vegetables are a currency in a battle of wills between them and their parents. For parents, the primary motivation is all about risk. Is that what parents fear most is friction in the home, waste, whether that's waste of time, waste of effort, waste of food, and waste of money. And mitigating risk is how many parents think when they shop and when they cook. Now, if you look at that formula, what you've got is an inherent conflict between the two, right? And knowledge plays no part in any of this emotional structure. It's all about perceptions. So what we did with Eat and Defeat Them, and we looked at veg campaigns around the world, And generally, they kind of took on the same few ideas. So you get like a burly farmer with a wicker basket full of vegetables, which just isn't real. That's not what food looks like in the real world. You'll get annoying dancing vegetables and fruit, which is really hard to anthropomorphize food, and it takes genius work to do it well. And if you do it badly, it has a really negative effect. And everything done with vegetables to anthropomorphize food is terrible, terrible. You get people lecturing about nutrition, right? Or you get people in £30,000 kitchens with these perfect golden children who come skipping after school and go, "Mummy, mummy, can I have some carrots, please?" I mean, all of it's just nonsense, right? And totally unrelatable for people. And we looked at it and said, we know that will never work, and it's never worked, and never has, and never will. So we said, okay, what we need to do is we need to go to where the kids are, and we need to put kids and parents on the same side. Because as long as they're on different sides, we fail. So the idea with Eat and Defeat Them, sorry, it's a long answer to your question, but let me get to the key point here. The long answer to Eat and Defeat Them is what Eat and Defeat Them does says, you know what, kids, you were right. The vegetables are evil. They're taking over the world. But there's only one way you can stop them, is you've got to eat them, right? And what you've got there is the basic narrative of pretty much every children's story. It's the basic narrative for Harry Potter. It's the basic narrative for Star Wars, Chronicles of Narnia. It's the basic narrative of almost every decent children's story. And so you've got parents and kids on the same side. They're going, come on, let's eat them and defeat them. They're playing. You're forcing parents to play. That friction, you just removed it. But then what you've also done is you've filled the parents full of confidence. The kids come skipping home from school saying, "Oh, I tried broccoli at school today." And the parents go, "Great, I'll get some broccoli." Right? And all those kind of worries start to disappear. And that thinking is what's made this campaign, just fabulously successful. Sorry, long answer. My apologies.
No, I understand. Thanks. And how did you work with children throughout that process of kind of building up that message? Were they kind of involved early on? How did you know that this was going to resonate with young people before it went live?
Oh, yeah. So we had lots of fun with kids. And one of the most interesting things we did is we got a bunch of kids to bring in their favorite thing. Right? Didn't matter what was the favorite thing. We took photos of all the favorite things, we stuck them up on the wall. And another wall, we had a picture of all the veg ads you've ever seen in your life. Right? You know, the things you've seen. Mm-hmm. And the contrast was just mind-blowing because immediately visually it was completely different. Because what kids love is bright, it's kinetic, and it's energetic, and it's boom, 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 boom. Where all the veg stuff was really, it's being created by people who love veg. And it talks to people who love veg. And it doesn't feel vaguely like the way a 7-year-old thinks. It feels like how a kind of, 30-year-old veg lover thinks. Right? And so that immediately visually went, so okay, fine, this needs to be loud, this needs to be crazy. Children's ability to process speed and phonetic energy is much, much greater than adults. And so they can process mad in a way the rest of us will go, oh, it's a bit confusing. Okay. And then we talked to the kids a lot, and we really tweezed out these kind of attitude things. And then we started to play, and then we threw ourselves into the abyss. I mean, the interesting about perhaps another difference between the world of marketing and advertising and the world of public health is there's no science or evidence to really support Eat and Defeat Them as an idea because it's never really been done before. So we did the best we could. We threw ourselves into the abyss. We could have crashed and burnt and be terribly embarrassed and we'd be sitting here now, or we could fly, and we flew. And that's the kind of risk profile that I think people who don't necessarily work for a government department or a local authority can take that perhaps maybe others can't.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's a really good point. And of course, since the campaign did go live, there has been quite a lot of evaluation work you've done. What have you learned about the impact it has had?
Okay, so let me give you an idea of the insight that we have at our fingertips. So every year we do a pretty comprehensive survey of 3,000 parents and 3,000 kids, which, to put it in perspective, makes it 6 times the size of the National Diet and Nutrition Survey. And we do it every single year. And it means at that scale that we, at 3,000, we can, and 3,000 parents, 3,000 kids, we can dissect down into the granular detail. We can look at the kind of cross-tabulation type effects, socio-demographic effects, relationships between attitudes and claim behavior. And we do it every year, and we've done it for 5 years, and we're getting better and better and better at doing something which is very hard to do, which is to get to the truth of people's food habits. What we then also do is we do masses of interviews and focus groups with parents, particularly in low-income communities. We also get given all the retail sales data for every single food category, for every single store in main grocery stores in the UK, which is donated to us. So we can take whatever we're seeing in the quant and have a look at it against the hard retail data and see how much that's mapping and where the truth might actually lie. And then thankfully, we're also supported by an amazing array of advisors, and people give so generously of their times. Everybody from the chair of LASA to the person who's peeling the spuds give their time so generously to us and share their opinions. So we are learning and learning and learning. I think, what have we increasingly learned? I mean, there's so much that I'm trying to find a way to not talk for another half an hour. I think what's really important is the power of schools to affect change. Now, what our model is on Eat Them, Defeat Them, which is definitely something we've learned and we stumbled into, I suppose, is the TV advertising celebrity support creates a lot of noise and a lot of excitement. What advertising does, it creates an environment for change rather than creates change itself. What schools great at is schools are great at turning that positive peer pressure and that excitement into a first event. So a trying of a broccoli, for example. But actually habits form at home. So if you only ever do a program that's in a school, it will just have a good day, it won't make a difference. At home, you have to create infrastructure that helps parents repeat, reward, and normalize the behavior the children have tried in school. So they see the TV ad, they have some fun, it's broccoli day, they try some broccoli, they get a really big, bold sticker, which the kids love. But actually for us, the sticker, as well as motivating the kids, is actually a letter home. Because the kids come home with a sticker, parent or carer goes, oh, what's that sticker? Oh, I tried broccoli today. And then we give them a reward chart, sticker pack, and access to a bunch of supporting information and knowledge to help them repeat, reward, and normalize. So you've got to look across that piece of the bits working together has been a very key learning. The second thing, which I think is probably the toughest piece of learning, is you can't improve children's diets without improving parents' diets. Particularly in the most extreme situations that we're really set up to help, where the kids have very, very poor diets. We are seeing for the research we've done that parenting style and parenting role modeling will pretty much it's twice as likely the child will have a positive attitude to vegetables and other good food if the parent does and if the parent role models well. And unfortunately that runs across all income brackets. And it's deeply profound. So we realize increasingly that we are talking to parents through kids in the same way that, McDonald's got that years ago, right? Give the kids a toy, the kids will make the parents come to McDonald's, right? We realize that actually if we want to bring about change in the child's life, we have to bring about change in the parent's life, and we can't divorce the two.
Thanks, Dan. Just to let the audience know, the reports that Dan mentioned will be shared in the chat. And before I ask my next question, I just wanted to remind our audience as well to join the conversation in that comments box on the right-hand side of your screen. Let us know if you've got any questions, because we'll be moving over to audience questions really soon. But one thing that you mentioned, Dan, just then was around the importance of parents and role modeling. Could you give us a few more kind of insights, top tips for parents and caregivers about how they can introduce more vegetables into children's diets?
Well, I can, and actually that gives me an opportunity for a shameless plug. So what we launched Eat Them, Defeat Them and build it up so it's in a reasonably stable place and there's good scale and successful and works really well. We've always realized that was only ever half the problem. The other half of the problem is we had to empower parents to get their kids to eat more veg. And so 12 months ago, we announced that we were putting together an initiative to build a body of excellence. And we realized feedback we hear from parents are things like, well, I tried to change for life recipe. It took me ages, cost a fortune, led to a massive great row, went into the bin, now can't be bothered. Okay. We hear things like, well, I don't bother serving veg to my kids because I want them to have a better time at my house than at my ex's house. And we hear stuff that's the real stories. So what we did, starting 12 months ago, is we took everything we've learned from like 6 years of doing this and all our surveys and just all our people who support this, and we pulled together the very smartest and best people that we've met during the course of this time. And together we have produced, there's a book, it's called Simply Veg, How to Get Your Kids to Eat More Veg, a simple guide to a tricky task. there's a website, which I'm going to say to everybody, don't go to it just yet, because it went live on Monday, and there's a few little gremlins that so maybe go to it live next week. And what you're going to see in there is there's no eat well plate. There's a bit about portions. There's really not much in the way of recipes. What it focuses on is on 4 areas, which is giving people the understanding, what's your kids' natural preferences around vegetables? How they engage through their senses? You know, yes, what's a portion look like, and what does eating a rainbow look like, and various other things that are useful information. And then the other 3 bits are about how do you engage kids? How do you take very veg-resistant kids through to maybe initially engaging in what we would call about veg scenarios, so arts, crafts, science projects, things of that nature, moving through to a light touch with veg, like picking out the shopping, to a heavier touch with veg, such as sensory experiences and cooking and prepping and serving. And you're taking kids on a very gentle journey of engagement towards ultimately eating, rather than just plonking your veg down in front of them. There's a whole load in there about how you take your food and slowly increase the quality of the food that you're presenting, rather than look for revolutions. And then finally, there's tons of great information about how you serve, how you role model, how you award. There's the 3 R's that come from the brilliant Claire Holly up at Loughborough University, which is, you know, rewarding, role modeling. I can't blank. Reoffering. There we are. Reoffering. Thank you. And how you bring these things into play. And it really is a coaching manual for parents. And in about a week's time, it'll be fabulous. And we are trying to distribute that to as many parents as possible through our partnerships. We'll give the digital content away for free. We'll give the printed content away for cost. We just want to get all this expertise into everyone's hand. And funnily enough, I'll add to it, we've also got a new friend. Our new friend, there he is, Sean the Sheep. We're just announcing a partnership with Aardman Animation. And so we're creating loads of lovely, lovely assets that are Sean the Sheep themed to help parents take their kids on their journey, including, I will stop the personal plug in a moment, the lovely Sean the Sheep Eats Peppers puzzle book and sticker pack, which is going out to 3,000 parents this week. So I think what we have to do in order to support parents is really start to understand where they're at. Stop preaching to them about diet. Stop making them feel like shit parents, right? And just walk beside them is the way to think of it. And we are trying to bring everybody together to walk beside parents as their friends on what is a difficult job.
Thanks, Dan. I mean, my 18-month-old has an amazing ability to pick the green things out of her lunch. So I'm looking forward to getting my copy of the book and seeing what I can learn from it myself. Yeah,
we're primarily primary. We're focused only on primary. Right. There's a very interesting thing in primary where there's a tipping point for children around the age of about 6, which is called neophobia, where they start to stand on their own 2 feet a bit more. And suddenly they were so good. And then they went to primary school, then suddenly they're so bad with their food. And that is really a critical point of intervention in order to turn around those kids' diets.
And what do you think school caterers can learn from the book as well? Is there kind of lessons that translate from home back into schools as well?
Well, I mean, school catering is in a very bad place at the moment. Right? There is unbelievable downward pressure on funding. You know, the real terms, it's been decreasing. I speak, because we're just getting ready now for the next year, I'm speaking to like 10 caterers a week at the moment. I'm talking about sort of, bigger school caterers. And what I'm hearing everywhere is there is just a slow, steady decline in nutritional quality because of money. So people are downgrading from fillet fish fingers to minced fish fingers, which is a massive great loss of omega, help me out, nutritious 3, is that right? They are getting rid of salad bars, reducing the amount of veg options. They're doing less scratch cooking. And what you're seeing is the quality of nutrition is nibbling away because simply the amount of money we're giving them to put food on the table is just not enough money. And unfortunately, quite a lot of that money gets siphoned off by schools into their other great needs that they have. And so we've got a bit of a race to the bottom in certain parts of the school catering section. And I would say it's very distressed. We should be very, very worried about what's going on in school catering at this point in time. That said, there's lots of great people and they do get behind things like things we do in other projects because they're dedicated, really, a lot of them are really dedicated to their kids. They're just being totally screwed down by government funding.
Agree. From who I've spoken to, there's loads of amazing things happening at the individual schools or council level. And I think there's definitely a importance to trying to get those kind of good things to scale across the country. Make sure we spread best practice. And I think that kind of moves me on quite nicely to my next question, really, because at Nesta we do try and think about scaling as early on in projects as we can. And I think the numbers associated with Veg Power's work are really impressive. In your impact reports, it estimates that 34 million people were reached by your advertising campaign, and nearly 5,000 schools took part in your schools program. So what do you think the kind of key is to scaling a program like Veg Power?
Okay, so the first part is money, of course. We scratch around and we don't get big fat checks of anybody. We get lots of small checks of lots of people, and Veg Power's greatest strength is it's an alliance of supermarkets and government and local government and caterers and everybody working together, everybody putting a little bit of money in, and we make that little bit of money go a long way. We could be in every school. No, that's not true. I could probably be in half the schools in England would do our program tomorrow if I had the money, but that won't happen because I just don't. So there's always that barrier, but that's the answer for everybody on scale. The second part is I think you have to really break down to make sure there's wins for everybody. So you think about what is it the school and the teachers want, and how do you make it as easy as possible for them? And what they want is there's so much pressure on their time. And there are so many people asking them to do things that go beyond teaching. They seem to be responsible for everything these days. So with the teachers, you've really got to think about how do you make this really, really easy for them to do. And that is about listening, but it's also about how you make your information available and how you present it. And we've learned loads, and there's still loads we need to learn. I think when it comes to the caterers, to scale up with them, it needs to be easy, particularly at the moment because there's no spare budget to buy extra ingredients. So don't look for things that require extra ingredients. They're probably down a staff member in most schools. So really think about what you're asking them to do in terms of labour. Really try and make it as easy as possible given the challenges they face, because the willingness is there with most catering teams to be doing the right thing and supporting their kids. And most people who work in school food love the kids and do it for the kids, right? So ease and simplicity. It's like with all these things, isn't it? Right? The secret to making these things a success is to listen to all the people you're trying to help, and try and make your thing work to them. We've also invested quite a bit in good tech. So we have a good platform for managing communications. If we've got to get packs out to 3,000 or 4,000 schools, we need some good tech and infrastructure behind us, which we've managed to invest in.
Great, thanks. And I think one question that we're often asking ourselves is related to scaling, is around that balance between maintaining fidelity, so the closeness that the program is replicated across schools or whatever types of organization you're working with, while also allowing schools to kind of customize, make it their own, feel ownership over things themselves. How are you managing to reach that balance as part of your schools program?
Yeah, this is something that's quite a big issue that we're always interested in. I think this is really key. So one of the things we measure is parental awareness of the program inside the schools. And we consider parental awareness of the program to be the best indicator we'll get of effectiveness, effective deployment of the program, because if it's being done well, the parents will know it happened, right? Because the kids will come home with stickers when we're talking about it, whatever. Right? And we're running at about maybe 57, 58% of the parents are aware of the programs in their school, which is way, way too low for my liking. We're getting it better every single year. What we're moving towards much greater flexibility, because what a lot of people do is they do a theme day, like a fish day, that sort of thing, right? Where we actually do 6 weeks. And we realize that we kind of have been designing for the converted, if you like. So we're designing for like the 5-10% of super kinos who do amazing, brilliant, stunning things. They create amazing displays, and they're just amazing, right? And actually what we're not really doing is doing a very good job to support those who perhaps maybe don't have the capacity to do that. So what we're doing this coming year is we're taking a different approach. Is rather than having quite a well-defined program, we're saying, look, there's a season. The TV ads are going to kick off in half term. We'll be running to the end of March. You could do a vegetable theme day. We've got 11 different vegetables. We've got supporting assets, and you can do a theme. You can do carrot day. We've got 10 different menu items that are popular school menu items, like roast dinners, where you can do roast dinner day, right? And there's assets to support that. And you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, as much as you want. And we're trying more to move towards that, to set the bar a little bit lower for maybe schools that don't necessarily have the desire or capacity to do as much as we might ask them to do. And it's a bit of a learning curve for us that one day we'll feel, I don't think we've perfected it yet, but we're getting a bit better. We're learning the whole time. But it's very hard. Schools are under a lot of pressure, particularly when the concrete starts crumbling.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Can I add another as well? Anybody out there also designs programs for schools? The biggest bugbear I hear from schools, which really infuriates me, is that this thing is great, but in order to do it, I have to spend 2 hours touring around the supermarkets to go and buy the things that we need, which I do after school, unpaid. I pay for it myself, and I really probably don't get around to claiming them. And I've heard that story so many times that if you are anybody who's listening to this is designing programs in schools, you have to do the whole thing. Right? The idea they're going to pop out to the shop and get a bag of carrots is a horrible thing to ask a teacher to do. And will present, and so we've worked really, really hard to make sure that they don't have to do that, which is sometimes is quite painful for us, but it's very much appreciated. Sorry to add an additional point there. I think it's really,
I think that's a great point. You know, it's important to make things as simple, easy as possible, because it's not, you know, people in schools' #1 job most of the time, is it? They, you know, thinking about education.
Heroes, right? I hear so many hero stories of them putting so much effort in outside of their paid hours in order to make things happen for the kids, and that's not fair, and isn't something that we should be, you know, encouraging.
Strongly agree with you on that, Dan. And once more, I just wanted to remind our audience to get your questions in the comments section on the right side. But one other thing that I wanted to discuss with you, Dan, before I move over to the audience Q&A, was around how we increase take-up of school meals. So, you know, how we encourage more people to eat school meals rather than packed lunches, which is something that Nesta we're really interested in, because often, you know, school meals are the healthier choice than packed lunches a lot of the time. And I think that's really important, especially where primary school meals are free, universities. So, for example, in Wales, and soon in Scotland, in London as well. So, why do you think that parents and children do choose to have, you know, bring in a packed lunch rather than taking up that offer of a school meal?
Okay, so I think this is really, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think universal free school meals is just such an important issue, and is something we desperately need as a country. But what I think we're seeing at the moment, for me, is quite a lot of system think that says, if we make these free, everybody will do them, and therefore that'll improve their diet and help the cost of living crisis. And pretty much all of that's not true. And on the reality on the ground at the moment, that's proving not to be true. Again, I go back to saying, don't ask why should people have free school meals. You ask the question of why they don't. And this is something we've done some work on. And I'm not going to go so far as to call this an evidence base, because it's not that big a survey, and it could have been done better. I'm going to call it a signpost to truth rather than evidence based. But what we heard back from parents is only about 30% of them flagged cost as a reason why they don't take up a free school meal. What was much stronger is that just a little under 50% says my child won't eat the free school meals. And then about 15% said where the parent is saying the school food is not good enough. Right? So we've got a whole complex array of emotions and attitudes going on there that go much, much more than money. And money is kind of like the entry ticket, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to come, right? School funding is, of course, important. If we are brutally honest, there's a lot of school food out there that isn't very good. And unfortunately, it's in decline at this point in time. There is a race to the bottom on price. And although, you know, we can all go and visit amazing schools at places like Chefs in Schools or HC3S, and we can see incredible food that we'd all quite happily buy in a restaurant, I can take to as many schools where you look at it and go, Jesus, I've just gone back to the 1970s. What the hell is that? Right? And unfortunately, that is quite commonplace, and funding and maybe standards, we've got to make our school meals good, and it's wrong to think they are. The third part we also need to be very careful of is there's a very poor culture around food in schools. So how it works, it says, as and when you are happy that you have finished, you can go out into the playground. So what we're doing is we're making play and food in competition to each other. And I'm particularly talking about primaries because that's my area of knowledge. And what happens is the kids come in and they wolf down until they feel like they're not hungry any longer. And most kids eat in the order, the carb, the protein, the veg. Right? And so what is happening is the veg is going in the bin. And if you're really spending time looking at school bins, which not only have I spent many a time looking at school bins, but we've actually studied school bins, it's all full of veg. So there is a massive difference between what we're serving and what kids are eating, and we need to fix the school culture of things so that kids are encouraged to stay in the dining hall, socialize, and go out to play all at the same time, and then they will eat and finish their food. The other things we think we need to look at is we need to... No, there's another point that really worries me. We have a little, even less evidence on this. I'm very keen to explore, because I think it's probably true, is that parents who give their kids a school lunch give them a poor quality tea because they feel they had a school lunch today, therefore I don't need to cook a proper meal, I'll just give them nuggets or whatever it might be. The danger is if we get this wrong, we just spend a huge amount of money serving up a bunch of food that people don't want to eat, the good bits of which end up in the bin, and the parents actually reducing the quality of the tea they give their kids because they think they've had a decent lunch, which they haven't. Mm-hmm. All of these are really, really fixable. But the important thing is we need to get beyond the system think and get to the human think. And think about how do we not only fund school meals properly, but how do we promote them? How do we make them exciting? How do we make so people want them because they're really cool and they want to be involved and they don't want to miss out? How do we create a stronger culture? How do we support the parents? Unless we look at those questions in parallel with how we fund school food, we're just going to waste an awful lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely needs a lot more work being done around kind of marketing, promoting school meals. And it's something that we are looking at quite a lot in Wales at the moment, trying to understand why more parents, children aren't taking up that offer of free school meals. And we're finding, once school meals are made free, parents do tend to really want their children to eat them. It saves them money, saves them time. But there is this, real fear that their child might be picky, doesn't like the school meal, and they're not going to eat anything. And it's something we're trying to understand. How do we kind of change those perceptions for both parents and children about what the school food is, what it looks like, the quality of it? How can we kind of promote, market it better? We've spoken to quite a lot of children as well.
To get back to that friction point, right? It's the morning. You've got to get your kids off to school, do 500 other things, do the laundry, put the washing on, blah, 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 get yourself off to work. Do you want to have that battle moment with the child where you're saying you're having a school meal today, you're not getting a packed lunch? Right? And is it worth what it costs me to do a packed lunch, £2, to not have that moment of friction in my morning, every morning? And the answer is no, I just don't want the hassle. I don't want the stress. It's just easier to make a packed lunch. And when we understand that that's the dynamic that we have to address, we might be able to find solutions that work.
That's a really good point, Dan. Thanks. I'm just going to move on to see what our audience has been asking as well today. So if you just give me a second. So one question we've got from John Stacey, which maybe goes back, and we've probably touched on it partly, but it's about how you've utilized, if at all, kind of behavioral science techniques, frameworks, or models within your campaigns.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've noticed, John, is there are two worlds of behavioral science. There's behavioral science that seems to exist in academia, which I don't really recognize as being behavioral science. And there's behavioral science that exists inside advertising agency and food companies, which if one set of behavioral science is winning, the other one's losing. I think it's pretty clear it is. I find that a lot of the behavioral science modeling is over-engineering and stating the obvious. And isn't sufficiently involved in the human emotion. And I got to say, I'm reasonably cynical of it as a science, as it represents in the academic community. I've sat in presentations of cutting edge behavioral science, and I sit there and think, if I had a 22-year-old account executive in that agency who didn't know that, I'd fire them. Right? And I think behavioral science probably needs to kind of think a little bit more about being psychological profiling. Because you can't do behavioral science unless you do psychological profiling. And I once did a project. I'll give you an example of how deep it goes. Many, many years ago, a very large soft drinks company came to me, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to turn sub-Saharan Africa into a billion beverage market. And so what they pulled a group of people together to do is we did a deep set psychological profiling of Nigerian teens, because Nigeria is a lead market for sub-Saharan Africa. And we got into all their emotional issues and what their ambitions for life and how they perceive themselves and what they wanted from life and all these things. And we created a 25-year plan of how over 25 years we would crudely manipulate those emotions and ambitions in order to turn sub-Saharan Africa into a billion beverage marketplace. Now that's the kind of behavioral science that's going on in the food industry. And it's like starting several steps back, I think, than what we see in academia and NGOs. And I think we probably need to spend an awful lot more time getting into that kind of psych profiling, which I don't see a lot of in the world of behavioral science at the moment. Sorry, that was a bit of a harsh answer. I'm sorry, apologies, John, but that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Thanks, Dan. We've got a question from Gabrielle, who's saying, I think it would be helpful to not just refer to public health as an entity, but to think about the prism public health gets caught up within, which is actually centralized government. So I guess that's more of a statement there, but I wonder if you've got any comments, Dan, on kind of working with centralized government more broadly, and how kind of public health fits in with that and the motivations. And
yeah, it's kind of complicated at the moment, isn't it? Because it's hard to really see that there's much of the public health agenda in government, and hasn't been for quite a few years. Is that, you know, Public Health England got closed down, OHID has been stripped back to very little, and it's kind of hard to see where the public health agenda is at the moment. I can't really think of where there is one, other than some vague notions and some poor plans. As many of you will know, there's a national food strategy, which is an outstanding piece of work led by Henry Dunby and Anna Taylor and others, that has got us full of good ideas. And we've just got to hope that when we come out the other side of an election, we actually have a government with a hands-on public health strategy, because what's happening at the moment is the local governments are all kind of swimming around on their own. They're tight money as well. And there's a distinct lack of kind of central leadership going on. And there's a philosophical conversation about the balance between changing environmental conditions or leaning on personal responsibility. And there seems to be an intellectual conversation that we know very firmly where the current government stand on that particular debate. And they've been quite clear about it. And it's only got worse in the transition we've had through the various prime ministers we've had. What's unclear at this point in time is quite where the Labour Party stand, because we're getting quite mixed messages. But we really have to embrace creating a more positive and healthier food environment, because how can the public health teams in local governments, their limited resources, essentially go toe-to-toe with the power of the ultra-processed food industry and the allure that it has for people? And it's, yeah, we're all going to have to wait and see till after the election, aren't we?
Thanks, Dan. I agree.
There. I feel uncomfortable getting that political.
No, it's a good point, Dan. And there has been, lots of kind of progress around the food environment, with policies and measures being introduced, such as the upcoming ban on HFSS advertising on TV. Sadly,
is that going to happen though? It's been up and coming for a very long time.
Yeah, sadly, these have been delayed, so it makes it more and more important that we kind of make sure we produce evidence, build public support for these types of interventions, which could make a real difference.
They did also. We can make a difference. I mean, part of the motivation for Veg Power is I spent 2 or 3 years quite heavily involved in some of the campaigning around some of these issues, and I just wanted to beat my head against the wall at how possible it was to get anything done. And so I went, oh, forget that. I'm just going to go out and do this. Right? I'm just going to go out and find some money and talk to some kids and talk to some parents and just get these kids eating some better food. Because if I sit here and wait for the government to do anything, I'm going to be 104 by the time that happens. And for me personally, and the way I'm wired, going out and saying, right, hey, Mr. Supermarket, give us some money. Hey, school, let's do this. And the whole thing grows. I kind of feel like we're making a difference. And I think there are other organizations out there doing fabulous work. And anything anybody can do, who are just getting on with it, and anything anybody can do to support those organisations, like the Soil Association and Taste Ed and so many others who are just doing a brilliant job. Because if we wait for the government to catch up, as I said at a government conference, which concluded that what we need was more research. I say, if you decide the conclusion is that we need more research, what you're just doing is writing off another generation of children who are going to leave school obese and probably be obese for life. And you don't have the right to do that. You have an obligation to act. And unfortunately, that's not how government works, is it?
Thanks, Dan. We've got another question here from Natalia Stastensko, who is saying, it appears that the biggest opportunity to impact children's future behaviours, such as regulation and reduction of picky eating, occurs when they are very small, under 2 years old. Sadly, most nutritional campaigns kick off too late, and we need to find ways to reach parents of smaller children. So what are your views on that, Dan? Is there kind of any research?
So Natalia, I would agree and disagree with you. I think children's health starts prenatal, right? And actually, if we want to raise healthy children, we need to have healthy pregnant mums. And then we need to have health in early years settings, good weaning practices and all those other things. We took a decision when we started this project that if we spread ourselves too wide, we would cease to be effective. So we decided to focus on primary, because I think the skills that we can bring as an organization are at the most effective in primary. Where I think in early years, I think we can achieve a lot more through more knowledge-based, we need to teach people how to raise kids at an early years, right? So we decided to go on primary, but I think there's just a huge amount that needs to be done, as I say, all the way through from prenatal and through pregnancy and breastfeeding and all these issues. They're all connected, they're all related, and we need to work across all of them if we want these children. The truth is, and I'll be slightly dramatic here, is about 30% of our kids are not set up well for life at the moment. And they're probably going to be quite ill for the whole of their lives, uncomfortable and miserable, and have type 2 diabetes and other things. And unless we do something, it's going to be really absolutely desperate for those people. And it starts, as you say, Natalia, we need to start right from the very beginning and keep on going.
Thanks, Dan. We've got a question here from Kanchan Janoja, who's saying that the marriage you propose between behavioral science and psych profiling from marketing can be found in the realm of human-centered design, perhaps. What are your thoughts on this? Are there any kind of mindsets, tools, methods there which could help solve these wicked systemic problems from a human lens?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, Kanchan, there's probably people who can answer that question much more efficient than I can, because I generally sort of look at some of these models and they just make me really frustrated at how poorly structured they are. And I just go, I can't be bothered with that, right? Instead, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and talk to some mums and have a chat with them and find out what's going on in their lives and learn things and become wiser. So, I mean, I'm just the wrong person to really comment on those models. I come from the world of advertising. The interesting thing about advertising, I mentioned this kind of earlier on, but I think it probably needs to be stated strongly, is what the whole world of advertising does is you look for people who've had a successful track record at coming up with big, bold ideas. They come up with a bigger, bold idea for which there is no evidence base, because it's new and it's radical and it's different. Nobody ever thought of it ever before. And you back them because they've proven to be successful and had good judgment in the past. And if it works, you explode it really, really, really quickly. And if it doesn't work, you drop it very, very quickly at a speed at which local authorities and government can't work. Right? So if you take, for example, one of the big food companies I used to work with, the way they're structured is they have 10% of their budget is for new, never happened before, no evidence supported. 20% of their budget is to take the stuff that was new and prove to be good and to blow it up really quickly. And then 70% of their budget goes to the staple stuff they know just works and is their backbone, which means that new ideas take an incredibly high risk profile. So you can't create a model. You're going on a hunch, right? And then you stick it out there, you give it a go, and if it works, right, away you go, right? Mm-hmm. And that, unfortunately, is not something the government can do because the risk profile on it is too high, right? And the ones who get it right end up being Apple or Coca-Cola or whatever it is, and the ones who get it wrong are the names you've long forgotten and can't remember.
It sounds to me, Dan, like a lot of the work you did early on developing your campaigns could potentially fit into the realm of human-centered design, even if they weren't kind of formally through a framework.
I don't really come from that. I'm sorry to answer the question badly. I don't really come from that academic background. I come from the fly by the seat of your pants background. that both of which, you know, how we bring the two of those things together is a very interesting question, because unfortunately, a lot of public health does need more structure and methodology than perhaps the commercial world.
Mm-hmm. And so, Dan, what's next for Veg Power?
What's next for Veg Power? Well, we've just done Simply Veg, and what we're doing with this now, here's the book again, just one more plug, is we're putting it out, first of all, to people with some expertise in the field. So if anybody here is listening and this is the area in which you work, which is probably true of everybody, do give me a shout, happy to send you a copy. And what we're doing is we're really putting it out for kind of, let's call it a public consultation, shall we? I say, look, we've done this, we've got all these people together, we've put something down, we know it's rough around the edges, but it's a different approach. Please feedback, become a stakeholder, because we are nothing but a collective endeavor, we're not for profit. Become a stakeholder, feedback, tell us what you think, whether it's good or bad, it could be better ideas, whatever. And what we're going to move slowly towards is a second edition, and we'll probably go through several editions over the next few years as we get better and better at it. And then we'll be trying to get this into the hands of every single parent by hook or by crook. We'll be saying, you know, our model says that if people want to leverage the content digitally, and when I say people, I mean, you know, people with some credibility, you know, local authorities or school caterers or nutritionists or things of that nature. If they want to leverage the content digitally, then they're free to do so, and we can give them content that is amazing content. If they want to leverage it physically and have things like this, you know, this one's co-branded to our good friends at Lambeth Council, we'll do that at cost. So we just want to get that content out absolutely as far as wide as we can in order to support parents and really get the narrative around, you know, how we encourage them on that front. I think that's what's going to be important for us, not just now, but, you know, we've always said we're on a 10-year mission, we're 6 years in, and this for me is the second part of the equation that we need to focus on.
Great.
And we also very much hope we also very much hope, you know, we absolutely share everything we do, the good and the bad. And we're really trying to say, if we can learn and share that learning with anybody anywhere and support anybody anywhere who's trying to do stuff, we do have some benefits. We're really good at getting people like Arbman or Tesco's or the government or celebrities and Deck or whatever it might be. We're really, really good at that kind of stuff. And we just want to help everybody to be more successful. And everybody questions for us, we are just trying to create a blueprint that everybody can play a part in and benefit from. So do get involved, right? If you can, if this is a subject that interests you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dan. I'm looking forward to having some future discussions with you about how Nesta and Veg Power might be able to work together in the future. Before we draw to a close, is there anything else you wanted to discuss at all? Is there anything we missed out that we should have talked about?
No, I think it's, I suppose the message I would put out to people that has been a source of frustration for me in the public health community is that people need to look up more. Is that evidence and understanding are different things. And I think people focus a little bit too much on the evidence. And when I used to run agencies, with all my people at the beginning of their career, one of the most beneficial things I ever did with them was I would make them go to a supermarket for a day. And I would say, I want you to walk around the supermarket watching people, and I want you to come back and tell me about the human dynamics that are happening inside the supermarket. And they would learn more from that day of looking up than anything they could read online. And so I guess a message I would always put as an ad guy talking to a public health community is looking up at the world around you and really trying to understand the really tough things happening in people's lives is the key to good public health interventions. That'll do.
Thanks a lot, Dan. And thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. And thanks for everyone who joined us online as well. It's been really interesting discussion. I hope the audience has found it useful too. Now that we've reached the end of the event, I would be really grateful if those joining us in the audience could please fill in a short survey. The link will be shared in the chat and it's also available in the event's description. And as a thank you for filling in the survey, you'll be entered into a prize draw to win £50 bookshop.org voucher. If you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter and we'll let you know about any other events coming up. Thanks a lot and goodbye.